Teacher, how do I complete my tax return in Australia? On this video, we're going to go through the basics of how you can complete your tax return by yourself in Australia. Note, let me begin this video by telling you a few things. First and most important disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Obviously, you could maybe do this with an accountant or with a tax professional. However, for many international students, when it comes to doing your first tax return, maybe your second one, we are not at a stage where things are really complicated in terms of like taxes, work, deduction, etc. So it is logical to consider doing it by yourself. I would say take this as guidelines or as suggestions, as things that you could do when lodging your tax return. With saying that, we are not going to cover anything super crazy complicated in terms of taxes. This is targeted for international students in Australia, or maybe somebody who probably hasn't worked for a very long time. Okay, and with saying that, let's begin. You probably know that if you're working in Australia, you are one of two groups. You are the TFN group or you are the ABN group. TFN stands for tax file number, and it is basically a number that you have that you receive when you're going to be working for an employer in Australia, right? You would also need to be filling out a tax form, and I would say depending on how you answered the tax form, you could be affected in your taxes, but again, that is like beyond the scope of this video. There is basically what it's called the tax-free threshold. In many cases, the employer will ask you when you're filling that for the first time if you are going to claim the threshold or not, and they help you decide. Basically, when you have more than one job using TFN, you can only claim the tax-free threshold with one employer. And what that means is that maybe you have your regular job, but if you have another job, maybe you will have to pay a lot of tax or little to no tax. So when the time comes to lodge your tax return, that could be a surprise. So this is a little tip if you watching are maybe working at 2 or 3 different employers using TFN. And of course we have ABN, which stands for Australian Business Number, and this is basically like your number to operate a business, and this is when you work by yourself. In the context of international students, many people doing Uber, doing deliveries, maybe even, in some cases cleaning companies, they ask you to have a TFN to contract you. Sorry, not TFN, an ABN, sorry. So in that case, it's almost like an easy way to think about ABN is like you are a moving business, or what we call a sole trader. So basically, with ABN, there is a little bit more work. And it is important to consider two things, which are your deductions and your expenses. When you're lodging your tax return, now technology is getting really good. Your employer is sending information to the banks, or basically banks having access to different types of information, as well as the ATO system, right? The tax office. So what will happen in most cases is that your employer, if you are working for TFN, of course, your employer will send, or would have sent already, all the information about your income to the tax office. So when you are logging into your account, what you will see is usually that there is some pre-filled information, right? But there is a part of that is not included, and this is your homework, and that's what we are going to cover in this video, which is deductions and expenses. But deductions is more when you are working for TFN, when you work for a company, right? Now, when it comes to deductions, these are things, this is basically when you spend money on something related to your work, or let me say it in a different way, something related to your work to generate income, right? To produce money. Think about maybe your uniform, think about maybe, for example, if you're working in construction, think about your boots, think about maybe if you work at a restaurant, like the slippery, the non-slip boots that chefs have to wear, and the list goes on and on. Then you have also, for example, transport, but transport you cannot claim to and from work. You can only claim when you are doing transport from one employer to another employer. So for example, if you live in Sydney and you go to the city for work, you cannot claim that. But if you go to the city and then you go from the city to another place for work, that you can claim. This gets a bit more complicated when you talk about expenses, because if you're working using ABN, you also have the right to claim for expenses. You will have your income, which is all the money that you make, and this is one of the downsides of ABN, that you have to pull out Excel or you have to pull out a program so that you calculate by yourself how much money you made. Maybe you can check on your bank, and if you've got maybe like a separate account for all the time you receive money or for all your work, then maybe that might be easier. It really depends on person to person, right? So you will calculate first all your income, all the money that you made in the financial year, which is from the 1st of July to the 30th of June of the following year. Then with your expenses, you need to, or you don't need to, sorry, you can claim basically any money that you spent to produce or to work, right? So think about, for example, I mentioned deliveries before, like if you bought a scooter, a bicycle, you could claim some of those costs. And when it comes to like driving a car, again, this could get a bit more complicated, but maybe you could claim the fuel, or you could claim the fuel that you use when you're working. Or maybe if your car needed a repair and you used your car mainly and only for deliveries, maybe you can claim that. So this leads me to my next tip, which is in the deductions and expenses part, there are some limits and as to how much you can claim. And there is like examples in the ATO website. I have put that website down below for you. And I would recommend, and now this is getting into the most common mistakes, is don't be too aggressive when it comes to claiming your deductions or your expenses. So the reality is that, especially like in your first tax returns, depending on what you're doing, unless you are in a very specific or special situation, most likely your expenses or your deductions are not going to be that high. And this could be a problem, because if you exaggerate your expenses, if you exaggerate your deductions, it's not like you're going to get automatically checked, but the ATO is always increasing how well they check all the tax returns. So just to save you a headache, one of the most common mistakes is, number one, is claiming too much. So for example, maybe someone might say, oh, I have to use my phone for work, but then that person maybe claims all their phone bills. Well, maybe, do you use 100% of your phone for work? Really? Or maybe it could be with the uniform, as I mentioned before. Maybe a pair of construction boots sounds reasonable, but maybe 5 to 10 pairs of boots? I don't know. And this is where, again, when people, let's say, exaggerate on their claims, then this could be flagged in the ATO system and you could get in trouble. Or maybe you will get audited and someone will review your taxes and everything, and then if there is a mistake or something that needs to be fixed, you would need to go through that, and that's just really a headache. If you're watching this and you're an international student or you're thinking of coming to Australia, most people in their first 2 years in Australia, you're probably thinking about school, uni, maybe you want to enter a course, maybe you have to take IELTS or PTE. You don't want, or other things, so you have life in Australia, so you don't want to have this tax return as a problem, as an extra stress for you. And by the way, if you do want to pass IELTS or PTE, I'm an English teacher. I help students prepare for these exams. I normally do monthly courses. I also do individual classes. Anyways, I have lots of ways I can help you out when it comes to test preparation. My link is in the video description. It's like the first link on the video. And if you do need a translation to bring into Australia, I'm a native translator, so more than happy to help you. from English into Spanish or from Spanish into English, if you have a document that you need to translate, get in touch, okay? The last thing that you want to do is to get audited, right? You don't want to get checked, you just want your return to be smooth and easy. And the good news is that in many cases, you will get money back. So don't exaggerate all your expenses or all your deductions, because the reality is, based on how like the tax tables work and based on how much you're going to be working, because you're also studying, it's not like you're going to be making so much income that you are going to be paying a lot of tax. That could happen, but that is in different situations. I'm talking in general, yeah? Then, the other thing that is important to tell you is that the same way that you could claim too much when it comes to your deductions and your expenses, you could also not properly report your income. And this is obviously another problem. This is something that tends to happen more when people are working doing ABN. Maybe you didn't calculate everything properly. Maybe you didn't include cash transactions. If you look at the ATO website, as I've been telling you, you will see that there are lots of tips, and sometimes it can be pretty straightforward. Now, if we're looking at something more complicated, then yes, of course, do it with an accountant. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, on your first tax return, there is going to be less technicalities, meaning that, there is a high chance that you could do your first return by yourself. You could also take this video as an educational video and then just pay an accountant or pay a bookkeeper, pay somebody to do your tax return for you. The good news is that in the following financial year, you can claim for that payment. So basically, the fact that you paid someone to lodge your tax return for you is a deduction that you can claim. There are other common deductions that you can claim, which are, for example, like laundry for all the work equipment that you have to use. I told you about uniform. And then look, there might be other ones, but this is really specific to basically what you do. I remember when I came to Australia, close to 14 years ago. No, sorry, a bit over 14 years ago. I remember that I worked as a cleaner for like the first few years, and I didn't have many deductions. I had mainly my laundry, maybe a few donations, and that was it pretty much. There wasn't that much. The only thing is that it wasn't all automatic like it is now. So I would have to get a summary from my employer, and then I just go ahead, put that in. Now that's not how it works, but this is just to show you how simple it was. It was like I put my income, I put like a few deductions, not many to be honest with you, and then you just hit calculate. That's it. You also have to put your insurance, and there is a big tip that I'll give you before we finish this video, which is that if you are an international student, you don't have access to Medicare, and there is a 2% Medicare levy exemption that you can claim because you are not eligible for Medicare. That was a culture shock when I became a permanent resident and I have to put yes, I am entitled to Medicare. I'm like, really? Because I've been putting no so many times. But in your case, or the case of any international student, you have to put in that section of the tax return, I am not entitled to Medicare, so that you don't get to pay that extra Medicare charge. You basically answer the questions and remember to put that you were not entitled to Medicare for the full financial year, which will be 365 days. There you have it, guys. Obviously, look, I love this topic, but again, I'm not a tax expert. I don't do this for a living. This is like some general guidelines, some tips that will probably help some of you watching this. And again, this is not financial advice. You may be wondering, what test should I do? Should I do IELTS? Should I do PTE? I don't know what test is better for me, teacher. In that one, I can really help you out. I've got this video right here where I do a full assessment of the 2 exams in 2026. So go and check it out. If you do have any questions, this video will definitely help you. And if you want to study with me, you want to get the test ready, go ahead and get in touch. First link in the video description. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Anyways, I'll see you in this video. Take care and bye for now.